OWC, or Orange Watch Company, is a brand you may or may not be familiar with. They are based in New Zealand and have been around for quite some time now. I wouldn't call them one of the OG microbrands, but you can trace them back to around 2010 or 2011, so just about a decade now. That is a long time in the microbrand world, considering the competition and the fact that so many microbrand owners do not produce watches full time, and it's only a part-time gig for them. Speaking of owners, Dan, the owner of OWC, can be a little eccentric, which I'll talk about in this video, and I'm also going to highlight many of the things that make this watch really stand out from the others in the microbrand crowd. This really is a hard-use, purpose-built watch, and because of OWC's lack of marketing, you may not know that, but hopefully after this review you will. So let's jump into the review of the OWC World Timer. I hope you like the new intro, and if you look on our social media, you will see we have a new logo as well that will be integrated into a new website eventually, as well as Watch Report merchandise. A shout out to Steve Hassler, who created the logo and intro. A true professional and was very easy to work with, especially with myself not having an artistic background and trying to convey what I wanted, and he nailed it. You can check out his Instagram below in the description, and do not hesitate to contact him if you need logos, video animation, YouTube intros, or any other graphic design work. He is top notch. And just an FYI, no, Steve did not do the work for us for free. We paid the normal going rate he charges. I won't say exactly what it costs because it all depends on what you're looking for, but we did find him to be very reasonable. So first things first, I do have a lot to talk about here, but there is something I want to get out of the way first. You will see on the OWC website lots of information about how these watches are built and assembled, where they are assembled, more on that in a bit, and everything else you need to know about their watches. OWC is pretty transparent with everything, including his personal life. Now you may be asking, why am I sharing this information? Well, if you were to inquire about purchasing a piece as you can't order directly from the website, you may get more info than you wanted to know. If you sign up for the OWC newsletter, you will really get more info than you wanted to know. What kind of info? Well, about the owner's personal life, his divorce, his father, and much more. Info that most of us wouldn't share with strangers, much less ones we are trying to sell a product to. I'm not going to lie, even my correspondence with the owner for this review piece was a little off-putting. This is not the first watch I have reviewed from OWC, and the newsletters and correspondence were always quirky, but it's become weirder as the years have gone by. It is oversharing for sure, and I think prospective buyers should know that going in. Fortunately, this World Timer and others from OWC are one hell of a watch, so if you really want one, you may be able to overlook it. But for those that have no time for nonsense, you may just pass or opt to buy one pre-owned. With that out of the way, let me tell you this OWC World Timer really is a step above, or a couple of steps above, most microbrands. Let's take design out of it for a second. The build quality on this watch is second to none. As I said, a lot to talk about here, but let's start with the usual, the packaging. The OWC box has always been something unique. This time around, it is a metal and plastic box that is hard to open but can be completely disassembled, though not sure why you would. Inside you do get a lot of goodies, including cufflinks, extra Torx bars, and Torx drivers to size the watch and remove the bracelet. This box is probably cool enough to be used to store things other than watches, maybe straps, maybe some personal effects, etc. The actual watch is in a small Pelican-style case lined with foam. Now I will try and cover mostly everything here in this video, but there are certain things I really want to highlight here, so be sure to check out the written article on watchreport.com for the full breakdown. I will have that up in a few days after you see this video, as I have been trying to work on other things, and as such, I'm a little behind and currently catching up. But let's discuss where these watches are made. OWC, as I said, is pretty transparent as far as components and watches being built using sources from around the world, Europe, Asia, and elsewhere, and being assembled and tested by hand in Switzerland. But these watches are not Swiss made, even though this one with the SW300 movement technically could be labeled as such. The World Timer is available with 2 movements, and you guessed it, for 2 different prices. The SW300 I have here is $1,699 and is a chronometer grade, though it is not COS certified. The other movement is the Seagull ST1812, which is an ETA 2892 A2 clone and sells for $1,380. Both are available with either date or no date. The World Timer is a compressor case. Yes, an actual compressor case, and no, it doesn't need to have 2 crowns to be a compressor case. The crystal has a retaining ring and the case back is retained by 6 screws, and both move inwards as pressure increases to make the case more water resistant. Here are the full specifications. It is a 40.5 millimeter case, 12.9 millimeter thick, lug width of 20 millimeters, a lug to lug of 51 millimeters, an 8 millimeter knurled crown with no crown guards, a 4.5 millimeter sapphire crystal with an inner AR coating, a knurled world time bezel. That was difficult to say. It is black dial only, 20 millimeter bracelet, 4 millimeters thick with no taper. This piece is pretty weighty as well and comes in at 217 grams. When it comes to case design, OWC claims this is not an homage to anything and not in one of their in the spirit of designs, but it's not like we haven't seen watches with World Time cities marked on the bezel before, and the case is pretty much the same as their Bond model. It is using sword hands, which are pretty common, and the case design is floaty, as I like to call it, or soft, like a Seiko turtle, meaning no defined edges or lines, more cushion and curved-like, and as such makes for a very comfortable watch. So altogether, would I say you can find an exact watch out there like this? Not to my knowledge, but you can see some inspiration from other pieces, but I could say that about almost any watch out there these days as well. Simply said, this watch is very well put together. The crown action is very precise, no stem wobble or crown wobble at all, and very easy to use, which is what you expect from any watch, especially a dive watch or a dive style watch that is 300 meters water resistant, but we all know that that is not usually the case. The bezel won't be used for any timing, so being absolutely precise with this clicks is not really necessary, but it is easy to grip and use, and just a satisfying bezel overall. Speaking of the bezel, let's talk world time. This is not a true GMT, as there is no GMT hand. So things are simplified when tracking another time zone. It's straightforward here. You set your local time, then set the bezel to the time of wherever you're going, and that's it. You could reverse this as well, all depends on how you want to keep track of 2 time zones, but if you were looking for an actual GMT watch with an extra hand, this obviously isn't it. The dial is simple but beautiful, and it's a somewhat sunray dial. As you can see, it does reflect a little bit of light and looks charcoal gray more often than not, as opposed to a flat dial that would absorb the light. Raised markers filled with lume and really precisely cut hands and markers, which helps give it the more premium feel. One important thing I want to point out is that the dial looks so good in part due to the sapphire crystal and AR coating. On screen you can see how clear the crystal truly is, almost no reflections at all, and at times it looks like there isn't even a crystal on top of the dial. I wish more watch crystals were like this. When we get to the lume, it is a mixed bag. C3 Super Luminova is being used, but as you can see, it's not blinding lume. That's okay though, it's still easily readable, and more importantly than being the brightest lume out there, it is decently long lasting. I was able to read the time 6 hours later in pitch black darkness with ease, so the lume is more than suffice, but if you are someone who loves the brightest and craziest looking lume, you'll have to look elsewhere. With the exception of my caveat at the beginning of this review, I would say I have been pretty positive about the watch, and for good reason. There are a few things I do want to point out though that I wish would change. One is the case finishing. I know most do not have an issue with high polished case sides, but in a watch like this, I would prefer an all bead blasted version or all brushed, but that's subjective. But the biggest sore spot for me is the bracelet. I have talked about this bracelet in the past, but the biggest issue is the clasp. OWC continues to use a butterfly deployant instead of a dive style flip lock closure. The links can all be removed and the tool is included. The bracelet is well finished and very solid, and it does include 2 half links, but I have never found it very comfortable at all. No matter what way I do the configuration of the links while sizing this watch, I removed 2.5 links for my 7.5 inch wrist, by the way, it is not long-term comfortable for me. I am not sure if that is because of the butterfly or because it has no taper, but I wish it had a standard clasp. It does have screw bars for the lugs and the tool is included, so you can switch this to any strap of choice, but a simple redo of the bracelet would really put this watch on another level. So that is the OWC World Timer. I do think this is a fantastic watch, and bracelet issues aside, I feel this is a watch that is extremely well made, solid, and could handle whatever you throw at it, and it looks and feels like a step above many micro brands. And with this SW300 movement, I feel it warrants the price tag. No, it is not cheap, but you know this is a well-made watch the second you pick it up. And just to touch on what I said in the beginning of this review, I was not putting info out there to defame Dan from OWC. I know he is pretty aware of his newsletters and emails and how they may come across, but I do find it weird, and being completely blunt, I never needed to know the info about him that I do know now. I wish he would keep things business orientated and leave the personal stuff for friends and family. If you want to see more about this piece, all links are in the description, and like I said, in a few days, a link to watchreport.com for the written review. Please like, share, and subscribe, and hit that notification button. Also, please do take a moment and go over to our Instagram page and check out our posts. With the algorithm these days, it's always a constant battle to get the posts out there, so your likes and support truly does help. As always, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you here on the next review.